Hello, my princess. I thought I would record some quick thoughts about the Canadian election that's going to be happening today. Uh, just to give you an idea of what Canadian politics is like, and what my thoughts are on it in this election. Uh, I know it's a bit cliche for most people to say, but this might actually be the most important election of my life. And that's not entirely obvious unless you've been paying a lot of attention to Canadian politics over the last 20 years. Uh, Probably the last time this election was this important was when the Bloc was threatening separation. Now, with this election, we not only have, well, I should actually stop and I should back up. So, Canada, it has a uh, number of federal political parties. You've got your Conservative Party, which is represented in blue. You got your Liberal Party, which is represented in red. NDP Party represented in orange. The Bloc Québécois, which is represented with a light blue. And then you've got the Green Party, which is represented with the color green. And then you've got the People's Party of Canada, the newest party on the block in terms of time that it's been around, and it's represented in purple. Uh, the current ruling party is the Liberal Party. They're extremely corporatist, despite all of their rhetoric about being for the people. They're very much not. Most of their policies tend to favor large corporations. You know, all the while they pretend to be championing the people. It's kind of it's kind of funny. They're really unpopular right now just because of how they've disastrously governed over the last nearly 10 years. Justin Trudeau, our former prime minister, uh, he's he put us into more debt than both World War One and World War Two combined. So I've never I can personally hardly understand how a peacetime prime minister can spend more money than two wartime prime ministers. It's absurd. Uh, he stepped down, and then we got a new guy, Mark Carney, who's filled the position, and he hasn't lived in Canada for like 10 years. And there's reports that his family doesn't even live in Canada now, even while he's running for the office of Prime Minister. So that's all fun. Then we have, then, the the Liberal government had been operating as a minority government, which means they didn't have the most amount of seats in Parliament, so they had to have the support of other parties in order to rule. And the party that was supporting them was the NDP. There are, that's a nice way to describe them. There are naive socialist party that operates here in Canada. They've been championing uh, the labor rights while supporting the Liberals, which are the corporatist party, as previously stated. So they're looking to get absolutely wiped out in this election. I've seen their seat projection as low as 0 and as high as about 18. And that's apocalyptic for their numbers right now, which is funny because, like, 10 years ago, they were the official opposition. So they've had amazing choices of leaders that have all decided to bet on supporting the Liberals, which is incredible because that's not why people vote NDP. If they wanted the Liberals to get a blank check to do whatever they wanted, I don't know why they wouldn't have voted Liberal instead of NDP. But c'est la vie. Um, We've got the Green Party. They're more or less non-existent. They have one seat right now, I think. They're looking to only have one seat by the end of this election. Their biggest hang up is that they want to emphasize protecting the environment, and the way they want to do that is with socialism. So, again, I don't know why you wouldn't vote for the NDP party instead of the Green Party, unless, of course, you're colorblind and you don't know the difference between orange and green. But, they're hardly a party worth talking about. Next party worth talking about is the Conservative Party. They're the second largest party federally in this country. They're looking to unseat the Liberals and form government. The talk that I've been hearing is that if things go in the Conservatives' favor, they might form a minority government with the support of the Bloc. Otherwise, we're probably going to get another Liberal government if the Conservatives can't form government. The only other hope is that they actually somehow manage to take the majority, which is... It's not exactly clear that that's possible. Not if you're looking at the polls. I mean, the interesting thing is, over the last month or so, the polls have gone from a relatively wide Liberal lead to a very narrow race between the Liberals and Conservatives. And the trend has been that if we had another month, I would think that the Conservatives would be beating out the Liberals. It's the way the polls have tightened is kind of shocking. And there's this weird misnomer that the Conservative Party in Canada is like the Republican Party in America, which is very untrue. The party is mostly led by people that would prefer to put Canada first and wouldn't bow to the United States. So I have no idea why so many people think that a vote for the Conservative Party would be capitulation to the United States. But there I go, getting ahead of myself again. The other important party is the Bloc Québécois, which is the French separatist party. They want the province of Quebec to either gain independence from Canada or otherwise get the most amount of benefits and perks from Canada. And if the Conservatives form a minority government, they're going to need to do so with the support of the Bloc. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to form a minority government. And because the NDP more or less got wiped out in their support base, because the NDP more or less got wiped out in their support base with supporting the Liberals, there's very little doubt that the Bloc will support the Liberals if they're wanting to form a minority government. So, because if you're voting for the Bloc in Quebec and you're not, because you don't want to vote Liberal and you don't want to vote Conservative, if the Bloc Party typically takes policy issues that are opposite to the Conservatives. So if there was a minority government between the Conservatives and the Bloc, then it would really be a government of compromise, because the Conservatives would have to concede certain things to the Bloc, which the Quebec would see as favorable. Whereas if the Bloc just supports the Liberals, my sense is that would just be a slap in the face of Quebec voters, and you might see actually the Bloc get electorally destroyed in the next election that comes, which would be interesting. But I also doubt it, because political speculation that far out, I think, is like predicting the weather 10 days from now. That weather report is almost never accurate. But that is what it is. The People's Party of Canada, they are an up-and-coming party, but they don't have any seats in Parliament right now. So they're not relevant to the conversation right now, unless we want to get into a conversation about vote splitting between them and the Conservative Party, which I think is a moot point for the most part. But yeah, the reason I think this is going to be the most impactful Canadian election is because in previous elections where separation was being tabled, it was just Quebec wanting to separate. Now it's Quebec wanting to separate and rumblings that the province of Alberta wants to separate, which also has Saskatchewan saber rattling that they want to separate, along with Manitoba and parts of British Columbia. So that's the danger of the Liberals winning, is that the Bloc might be able to convince Quebec that they can separate, that they can vote to separate, and the Western provinces, being Alberta, British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, if a Mark Carney gets in, they're going to again feel like they are being isolated, because there's a long and storied history about Western Canada being ignored by Ottawa, which we don't need to get into, but into detail anyway. But for our purposes, it's just important to know that the Western provinces have felt ignored and neglected by Ottawa, and this has spurred a separatist movement in Western Canada, which would more or less, if Quebec separates and Western Canada separates, that's pretty much the end of Canada. There might be a place left on the map still called Canada, but Canada as we know it ends there. So that's why I say this election is the most important election of my lifetime. Because this is either a rebirth of Canada under a Conservative Party supported by the Bloc to hopefully reform the country and make it more equal for all of the provinces, and possibly revive our economy that has so terribly been neglected under the Trudeau government. Or under Mark Carney, there might be enough of a groundswell support to lead to the breakup of this country. And if that were to happen, I have no idea, because I've never lived through a country breakup. Like, I probably did, as a 2-year-old child back in the 90s. I think that was that when the Yugoslavia collapsed. Either way, I was too young to understand any of that. So and I'm not sure any quote unquote stable Western country has ever broken up. A country like Yugoslavia breaking up was very unstable, ethnically diverse, religiously diverse, and was coming out of communism and dictatorship when it broke apart. So it was a very bloody and messy affair. Whereas if Canada was to break apart, I'm not sure how that would look, because no country's ever peacefully broken up like that before. I mean, maybe someone could point towards Ireland breaking away from the United Kingdom, but that's kind of a messy affair with the Troubles too, so I doubt that's a good example. Yeah, this is going to be the most interesting and important election of my life. As a Canadian, anyway. I'm sure other people would be pointing to elections down in the States as being more important, what with America being the world power. But as far as a old Canadian is concerned, this is probably it. This is the most important election of my life, and anything that happens after this is going to be a consequence of or response to this election. But yeah, I hope you have a good day. I'll talk with you again soon. Goodbye.